Hello everyone, I am Laethas and welcome back again for a very special video. Today I have for you an interview with one of the co-founders of Denpa Books LLC out in Portland, Oregon. Today I have with me Mr. Ed Chavez.
Howdy, nice to talk to you, Laethas.
It's a big pleasure for me. I never thought that anything like this would happen, but it's happening right now. So I guess the first thing we should start with is just tell me about yourself. Tell the viewers who are you and how did you get here?
Uh, I'm as you mentioned, my name is Ed Chavez. I'm the publisher of Denpa Books. Who I am. I'm a manga publisher. Been working on the business for uh, about 15, 16 years now, in different capacities in North America as well as in Japan. Um, and how did I get here? You ended up hitting me up on Twitter, and after a couple of scheduling, a little bit of rescheduling we had to do due to unfortunately some illness and some events. Here we are today.
All right, well, I'm happy to have you here. And so, what made you decide to even start Denpa Books in the first place? We have so many manga publishers out there. The industry is growing so rapidly, and you are an industry veteran. So, what made you decide to just start your own publishing company?
Well, contrary to what you just said, there aren't too many manga publishers in the States. Growth has not necessarily been all that much significant outside of publication size for maybe one publisher, and that would be Seven Seas. So, because of that, myself and my partners kind of came together to realize that it would be a good time right now to take a step forward to further progress the manga industry in North America. Historically, what we've been seeing, and particularly in English, has been a very tight consolidation in regards to what is published. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Viz Media is owned and founded by two of the largest manga publishers in Japan. Kodansha has recently purchased completely acquired Vertical Inc. And has folded that into the Kodansha group, uh, with a focus not exclusively on Kodansha titles, but primarily on Kodansha titles. About 2 years ago, maybe it's a little longer than that, Yen Press was purchased by Kadokawa, which is another one of the big four publishers in Japan, and increasingly that's going to, we're going to be seeing more of a focus from Yen Press coming from Kadokawa, which is almost exactly what we see from their Yen Online, their light novel line. And very recently, we ended up seeing Square Enix actually get into their market, like really recently, just about a couple of months ago. And so that's going to be doing a little bit more of the same. So when we came in, which was in 2000, well, when we launched, which was we launched a year ago, but we ended up developing things in 2017. The landscape wasn't as busy as it is right now, even though it's not necessarily all that much more, all that much more busy. But yeah, we felt that there was a need for alternatives in regards to manga acquisitions and how manga was being uh, produced, particularly in English.
All right, you actually kind of got to one of my other questions that I'm probably just going to jump to right now. It's several of the large publishing companies out there, as you said, Viz Media, Yen Press, and Kodansha, have some sort of affiliation or they are acquired by one of the large Japanese publishers. So is this potentially a problem for an independently owned publisher such as yourself or Seven Seas or maybe some of the other publishers such as Dark Horse who has comics, but you're exclusively manga, sort of similar to Seven Seas' situation. So does that make your situation more difficult or easier, or is it nice to have sort of the freedom of you get to decide sort of what you want to do with your company?
Um, it's let me answer like the latter half of that. Yeah, it's great to have freedom. Ideally, I would love for the other publishers to be in a situation like that as well. Yeah, Dark Horse and Seven Seas have a little bit more than you know the publishers we discussed earlier. But in regards to difficulty or challenges, not really. Not exactly. Um, is Denpa going to be able to get, you know, the latest Shonen Jump title? Not, possibly not. But to be honest, nobody else is going to do that outside of Viz. Is Denpa going to be able to get, the next breakout light novel property from Kadokawa? Probably not. Not necessarily that we would be clamoring to go after something like that, because that's not necessarily our mo. But um, at the same time, on a month-to-month basis in Japan, there are literally hundreds, um, well, multiple hundreds. It's not just like 100 or 200 or 300. There are hundreds upon hundreds of manga releases every month. There's about 500 to 700 releases about almost every week. Um, so there isn't necessarily a shortage on properties to acquire. And within all of those releases, there are plenty of gems. And historically speaking, most of those titles would not necessarily be licensed specifically in English. You would possibly see them in places like Korea or Taiwan, France, increasingly in places like Spain, maybe even Germany. But in the English market, for whatever reason, manga has been quite secondary, specifically to anime, and uh, you know, uh, a lot of titles have been actually very successful here in the U.S. Have slipped through the cracks from some very significant publishers. So yeah, uh, but it's not necessarily a challenge for us, but just like in everything, you have to be aware of the fact that you might not be able to get uh, the most obvious next big hit.
So is there kind of like they get first dibs if they want it, and then if they don't, you kind of get to pick it up? Is that how it kind of works?
Not necessarily. That's that's possibly like a very basic but misinformed type of attitude for that type of thing. Uh, you know, eh, Titles aren't just put up on a random draft board like it's like this is fantasy football or something like that. Um, Publishers have to go and do research and then speak with licensors in Japan to see if those titles are not just available, but if they're available in a variety of ways. Whether it's financially or artistically or politically. A number of factors can be tied into a, not just a release, but even the sale of a license. So, under those circumstances, uh, you know, having dibs or um, you know, having priority isn't what tends to occur for the majority of titles. Now, on the flip side, if you have a title from an author who has been published in in your territory, that's where things get a little more complicated. And under those circumstances, yes, more often than not, the licensor is going to go back to the current or previous publisher of that author, um, or in some cases a franchise, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, here's another publisher who's interested in working with author X that you guys are currently releasing. Would you be interested in continuing this relationship, or should we extend that to somebody else?" But under most circumstances, the acquisition process is a very it's a very simple thing, but it's also a very complicated thing at the same time because it takes a lot of research. It can take a lot of time, and as I mentioned before, there are a lot of weird little factors like finances and history and even politics.
All right, that seems much more complicated than what a lot of people would like. Seems like people like to gravitate towards the simple answers, but the reality of the situation is there's a lot of variables at play, is what it seems to be.
Yeah, I would definitely say that.
All right, so what made you decide to go with the name Denpa? I found a Wikipedia page for that specific word. Not sure how reliable you feel that page is. It says it literally translates as electromagnetic wave, and that it was used to describe people that didn't really fit in with their society. Uh, is this kind of why you chose the name of Denpa, or is there some other reason unrelated to that?
No, that's pretty much about it. I mean, we are also it's that and the fact that we're or at least some of the staff are fans of Dempa music as well. But um, the initial plan for Dempa was to do a lot more ebook distribution, and hopefully that's going to come down the line. That's not to say that our books are not available as ebooks currently, because most of them are. But we have some very specific plans in regards to that for the future. So that's where the electromagnetic wave part comes in. The other half, the delusion or just kind of outcasts, is yeah. I mean, we had no idea, even though collectively we have pretty close to about 30 years of experience between our staff. We weren't sure if this was going to take off or not, or if this was going to be viable or not. And I wasn't necessarily 100% sure if, but by the time that at the very early stages when we were working out the brand name, if even acquisitions are going to be possible for us, because yeah, uh, as I mentioned before, there isn't a lot of competition or not a lot of other publishers in this market, but um, there may be reasons for that, and part of that may be we have had a number of publishers kind of come and go very quickly, particularly over the last like 20 years, even more so since the economic bubble burst in 2008. So 2008, 2009. So yeah, whether we could immediately capture the attention and trust of Japanese licensors, that was always in the back of our head. So it may have just been a big delusional idea, but thankfully it hasn't played out that way so far. Knock on wood, but who knows what the future may bring.
Well, you have some nice series under your belt, so hopefully that will help things along.
Yeah, I hope so.
You mentioned ebooks. Now, forgive me if you're not at liberty to talk anything about this, but are there any plans at creating some sort of app that one would be able to use to read your manga digitally?
I can't go into detail about that exactly, but I can't say that you know we have thought about things like that.
Okay, that's good to hear. Um, Something in sort of the consumer side. I'm sure you're also aware of this because you're now a publisher. I assume you were a consumer of manga, which is why you wanted to be a publisher. But license season is a very exciting time. For whatever reason, people get really excited about new licenses being announced, and then when the books are actually released, it seems like the talk is less. But do you plan
Mm.
on doing your licenses sort of in bulk, sort of at cons or big events, or are you going to be announcing your licenses more sort of over time so that we always have something sort of to look forward to every month, that you're going to be giving us a new license that we have to look forward to?
Honestly, I can't. I have no idea. I mean, that's an interesting question. And when I was at Vertical, we would do them basically whenever, because we didn't go to every con, or we didn't think that was necessarily the smartest thing to do. I mean, social media isn't a bad place to announce such things. So, um, but it also isn't the same as having a room of a few hundred, maybe a couple thousand people, all cheering and screaming about a new acquisition in person. Um, so that's not something I've necessarily thought about in regards to Dempa, particularly because we're. I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we're not really we're very very small,
Yes.
and we're very very new. And we haven't been around even for a full year in publication, even though we've been working behind the scenes for a little while longer. Um, so we've since we launched, we've only announced four or five titles, and of those additional titles, I think two or three of them are one shots. So uh, you know we don't necessarily have like a big catalog. Now that's not to say that in the future, once again, if things progress in a you know organic and healthy way, um, where where we realize that this endeavor is somewhat successful, and financially viable, would we you know be announcing things on a more regular basis? Sure. Like right now, after the SummerCon season, I literally only have one acquisition that came through since, and actually I could have announced that at Otakon, because technically I found out over that weekend, but I'm just sitting on it because one, I don't have assets to share, so no files at this moment. Two, I technically don't have a contract yet, even though I have a verbal agreement. So, uh, having been in this business long enough, I know that just having a verbal agreement isn't enough. There have been situations from publishers where they get licenses yanked, even that deep, or even after things are contracted, for that matter. So, um, I didn't necessarily want to jump the gun in that regard. And but yeah, I mean, if I had the paperwork all completely settled for that, and um, and if I didn't have a con until I don't see when was the next con we're going to. It's Anime Weekend in Atlanta, which is Halloween weekend. Um, would I announce something right now? I I guess I could. It really just depends on what the maximum, um, you know, um, situation is to grab attention for people, and maybe for this specific title, we could do this anywhere, um, whether it's online or in person, but or on a podcast. But for very specific titles, I think it may help, um, to do things in person. This is particularly if they're from more indie or lesser known authors. Yeah. So just long story short, like uh, you know, licensing season doesn't exactly exist. Even though, ironically, I was one of the when I was at Vertical, I was one of the people who actually came up with the concept of licensing season. So, um, yeah, the reason that I would do that there was we we had to we were distributed by Random House. Actually, they're still distributed by Random House, and you have to present your catalog 3 times a year to them. So we had seasons for marketing, essentially,
Okay.
marketing to bookstores and book retailers. So, and that's usually 9 to 12 months in advance of the book going on sale. So, usually, you know, usually 16 to 12 months in advance uh, of the on sale date. So maybe 2 to 4 months before going into one of those sales conferences is when I used to call licensing season, and have things go on for a month, and then you know do surveys and then close that window. So um, I don't I don't necessarily have the same type of marketing situation with my distributor right now. So yeah, we're not. And once again, we're small, so we're not necessarily doing that at this time. But who knows?
There's always bigger
Who knows
plans
then?
for the future.
Absolutely, yeah.
So with that, so you're a smaller publisher, so obviously you're not going to have, as many licenses as some of the other more established ones that have been around for a while. But do you imagine that your licenses will primarily be focused, I know you said about hidden gems, but more on sort of indie comics, more mainstream series, or some of those series that are more in mainstream magazines that seem to get missed by the other publishers for whatever reason, or just kind of a mix of whatever you want to publish because you get to choose being the head
Yeah,
of your company?
yeah. I mean, it'll mostly be like the second one there. So, um, yeah, we're gonna go after um what tends to be moving in Japan right now. So that may be a lot of seinen. That may be a lot of a good mix of josei. Um, and at the same time, we're gonna also go after award-winning titles, and those things may not be. I have I used to have a blog, and I still tweet about manga quite a bit, and it's interesting to go through a lot of the um, award nominees for manga in Japan, and on a year-to-year basis, be like, okay, so here's a list of like the top 10 seinen manga or even shonen manga or shoujo manga that are released in a year, or like as nominated by either authors or critics or bookstores, and consistently be like, oh, out of this list of 10 to 20 books, 4 or 5 have been acquired. You know, that kind of just shows that for the most part, publishers here just tend to focus on what's obvious and not even what's quality. Um, so on the flip side, you know, we picked up things like Pampania, and we picked up things like Crab, and um,
I really
Heavily
liked
Delusion.
I really
You
liked
know,
Invitation of the Crab, by the way. I thought that
oh,
was a
thank
nice
you.
one.
So these are from artists that are basically redefining what manga is in Japan in some cases, or winning really significant awards in some cases, and um, why not go after them just because they don't have an anime. So, and yeah, they might be in one of the more popular magazines. They might even be connected to like a major franchise. Kaiji is like it's a multi-million unit seller in Japan. Um, Emiya Family is based off of Fate, and I honestly still don't know how that slipped through the cracks, um, but that's been a very big success for us, and it's a big hit in Japan. Yeah, so we're gonna, when we have our opportunities to go after something that's really mainstream and really obvious, we'll try to do that. But we're gonna prioritize for the most part. We're gonna prioritize quality, and that's gonna be narrative based as much as possible.
All right, that seems like a very good answer. Always want to be putting out quality content. Speaking of quality, I have several of your series, and your publications are always very, very nice. They always come with really, thick paper that feels good in your hands. It doesn't feel like you're just gonna tear it if you breathe on it wrong. Comes with French flaps. And it's at the same price point that Viz Media is able to put out for their series, and they're all in these large trim sizes. You've released an art book as well. Um,
Yeah.
are there any plans to do something such as like a hardcover deluxe release for any series, or is it still too early for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're definitely thinking about it. I will say it might be too early for us right now to actually execute on something like that, but we've been thinking about it from the very beginning. We we actually one of our very first licensing ideas that we actually got pretty deep into negotiating, um, but that was a political situation where we hadn't released a book yet, so uh, when when the contract went to an exec in Japan, they were like, "Oh, well, we're not going to extend this very significant classical work out to a total noob." Uh, Obviously, as I said before, internally we have experience, but we hadn't actually really released any content as Denpa. So there was a little bit of hesitance there, but yeah, down the line, hardcovers and other formats are definitely going to be coming down the line. You know, we do enjoy showing off production values as best as we can. And yeah, your points about the paper being good. If you pick up a Japanese book, you'll generally see cream paper. Why? Because it's actually easier and healthier on the eyes. White paper tends to have a lot of glare, and it's actually, that glare kind of not necessarily damages the eye, but actually it's not ideal for comfort. Um, so having a cream base uh, softens how light goes on the paper itself, and makes it a much more warm and and approachable read. The paperweight is also pretty decent, as you mentioned. We keep things like the B6 trim size. Oh, I'm sorry, A5 trim size and French flaps. Those aren't costs that are very significant, but um, coming from a couple of other publishing houses and kind of seeing what those costs are overall, yeah, other publishers might not do that at all, might not do it that often, might just because you know we've been seeing the same standard since the Tokyo Pop days, and change isn't always very very easy in a lot of industries, and sometimes people want to cut costs or save money. So right now, as a new publisher, we do want to distinguish ourselves in as many ways as possible, whether it's how our books look, how our books read, or like um, what we acquire. And yeah, being able to release a book like Future Log with a PVC dust jacket and 9 fold out, gatefold posters and multiple different types of paper on the inside, and or do a book like Pez with its dust jacket and foil and UV coating and original cover, completely original cover, and rice paper inserts, and full color on the inside, things like that. um yeah we're really excited to be able to show off that, because we want to show the customer base and stores and even publishers in Japan that, like, we can make these type of books in the US, even though the majority of publishers don't do it. And it's always just a choice, really. And we feel that this is a choice that people will appreciate. And I hope you agree with that.
I love French flaps, so I am 100% on board, and it's nice with the cream paper because it doesn't feel like I'm staring into the sun. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but speaking of that, I know Seven Seas Entertainment, they kind of had sort of a deal going on with J Novel Club where they would release the physical edition sort of their digital series for a little bit, and then I think J Novel Club actually just started publishing their own books on their own. Are there any plans to do any sort of collaborations with some of the other smaller publishing companies, or do anything with light novels, or are both of those sort of out of the purview for now?
So far we haven't had any talks with, or no one has approached us for any collaborations. Actually, hold on a second. That's not entirely true. Um, yeah, we have been approached by one very, very small publisher to maybe do something in the future. Like really, really small publisher. They've only released like literally a handful of books in about 10 years or so. Um, but uh, yeah, I think we're just too new, right? Seven Seas has been around for a little while. They're distributed by Macmillan, which is one of the larger distributors in the country. So if I were in a situation like J Novel Club, and an opportunity like that came up, I can see why that would benefit them. In our case, whether it's J Novel or I don't even know what the other smaller pubs are right now. Yeah, I'm not sure if it would be ideal for them to go speak with us right now, because we just don't have the manpower really to to do too much. And that actually rolls into the question about light novels too. It's I do most of the editorial here, and while we outsource translation, that's doing about 700 pages a month is not necessarily like the easiest task, especially since I have other work to do outside of just Denpa. So, um, under those circumstances, that there's only so much brain capacity, mental capacity to do X number of books, X number of pages, X number of words, and a light novel requires a lot more of a heavy hand, as far as looking for typos, checking the translation to make sure it's right, and that there are no errors in that regard. So, would we ever do light novels? I maybe it's something in the back of my head if we ever really get big. It's something that we keep on getting asked about when we go to Japan. But to be honest, I'd rather just focus on art books and if that's the other direction, do more manga because there's so much of that. Um, yeah, and the occasional art book. Who knows? Maybe even do some original content. We've been doing some doujinshi for some of our authors as well that we've been reselling for, and that's been somewhat successful. Though it's a little bit of a coordination type of thing. Um, and that's a little more in tune to what we would most likely do. And as you brought up before, things like digital, down the line, we want to do a lot more interesting things in regards to that as well.
Okay. So the other co-founder, Jacob Grady, he's the CEO and founder of Faku. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So is that what made your continued publishing of Superdimensional Love Gun sort of work just seemingly seamlessly? um,
um, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, it just kind of all happened to work out. Yeah, almost seamlessly. To be honest, that's a good way to describe it. They released that I believe in 2017. Had a nice a nice print run for it. Um, it went out of print for them the end of 2018, and for us it was just like, okay, well, you know we're still small, and we need titles to kind of fill in the catalog, and um, you know Kago does have a fan base. He actually has a couple new titles announced recently, like another volume of Dementia 21 by Fantagraphics, and there's another book released by I think a British publisher that's coming out. So it's not as if he doesn't have name recognition to a point. Once again, Love Gun sold out within about a year and a half, so that's a good sign too. So um, internally, it wasn't like a complicated decision to just be like, okay, let's reprint this. Let's do this under the Denpa line. We re-edited it, so the script is a little different. We re-lettered it entirely, and if you've picked up the book, it's a little more affordable than the Faku edition. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but most of them are there. Yeah, no, obviously no dust jacket, but it does have the flaps, and it has a lot of the art that was in the Faku edition. I think it's only missing like one little image that was under the cover, but we use that as a promotional material over the summer. So just kind of give something back to the fans who are aware of that. And yeah, it's actually doing surprisingly well right now in its new edition. I had a feeling that the price point would be a little bit of an issue for the Faku edition. So now that's a little more affordable. I mean, it's moving at a much faster rate than the Faku book, and yeah, it's actually exceeding my expectations by a lot, which is a good thing because yeah, it was like every book it was work. It wasn't we weren't didn't just turn it around in a day or two. Um, but at the same time, it was a lot less complicated than working on Kaiji or working on Crab, which are so text heavy and complicated visually. So yeah, that was a pretty, I won't say effortless type of production, but it was something that made a lot of sense, and thankfully seems to be paying off.
if it's doing better than expected, that's definitely a good sign.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you just mentioned Kaiji. I believe that release date has been pushed back. Is that because of a distributor change or a warehouse
Y-
change?
yes, that's correct. So that was that was a decision internally, as well as with our distributors. We're now distributed by Consortium, which is a division of Ingram, one of the larger international distributors for books. And when we started talking to them in February, um, one of their suggestions was for new series, it would be best for those titles to get pushed back to September when they had full control and management of our distribution, for a couple of reasons actually. One, I gave them a lot more time to market the books. So as fans may notice, and I'm sure they do notice because I get a lot of tweets about this and texts, email. Um, you know, the books are listed on Amazon. They're listed on Barnes and Noble. They're listed in variety of places, not just in the U.S. but across the globe now. Um, the other thing there too was, as I just mentioned, putting books in actual physical bookstores instead of just exclusively focusing on online shops and specialty stores. So, and I think that's what a lot of the fans don't necessarily fully grasp, is that you can make a book, you can publish a book, you can have thousands of copies of them, but if you do not have the distribution, the connections, um, to the right retailers, they may not accept your book unless you have the support of somebody else. So um, we launched in November of last year, and we consistently submitted books to Barnes and Noble and Books a Million, and to retailers and distributors in overseas, and a couple overseas places took our books, but BNN never did. Books a Million only took one. Um, it took a little while for Baker and Taylor to grab books and put some into libraries, but only a few. Amazon was the primary source for us, and then Diamond for comic shops. And yeah, even to this day, for titles like Emiya, which once again is one of our better selling titles, or Crab, or Future Log, you won't find those in a physical bookstore that's not a comic shop, even though they're selling very well, even though there is demand. Um, and that's not likely going to change unless even after Consortium takes full control of our distribution and sales. So unless there is like a huge groundswell of people saying, we definitely need to have volumes 1 to 3 of Emiya family in a BNN. So, for the case of Kaiji, for Heavenly Delusion, hopefully Pleasure and Corruption, those books, we're seeing pre-orders from those type of stores now, and that helps us in the long term because obviously it improves the reach of those books, and also in turn gives us hopefully more revenue that way as more people get access to our books in new capacities that are not just Amazon. And no, I understand with the fan base that it's hard to wait for something that you really want right now. But ultimately, we hope that might be the best solution for things like that. Now, at the same time, uh, you know, the last time that there was an on sale date change, which was the beginning of well, I'd say about like in spring, things got pushed back to September for Kaiji. Um, and yeah, it's most likely that that book is going to go out in October at this point, because we're just about to send it off to the printer. But um, I will notch that up just to, growing pains. We're still new. Um, we need to figure out how to manage 500-page book every few months versus a 200-page book. Kaiji also is a much older book, so there are no digital files. Things had to be scanned and hand clean and reformatted.
That sounds like a
Um,
lot of fun.
yeah, it is. It actually is a lot of fun. I'm being sarcastic, but um, yeah. So it's not necessarily in the best shape, and so yeah, that's where kind of the growing pains kind of come in. We're figuring out, how best to tackle that, who best to work with under those circumstances, um, h- how much time that actually takes for people, um, and these are things we did not necessarily expect. You know, Even last year in October when I finished uh, editing the script of Kaiji. So it's been part of that process has been available for a little while, though. We're still proofreading it right now. Now that uh, we have the files at a working capacity. So yeah, um, I think that's going to be the case for the next year or so at least. Um, it's funny, especially for me, coming from working at Vertical, and when I first started there, the only books that we ever would get out on time were our Sudoku books, because there was no translation, there wasn't a real lot of production required for a Sudoku book outside of put the puzzle down and make sure the page numbers line up and everything and make a cover. Um, but after a few years with people kind of learning their roles and better management, and that's something I need to learn to do as well. As someone who's essentially running a company about almost all by himself, almost. Um, it's there are a lot of little things that you can't anticipate all the time. Uh, I wasn't expecting to be out sick with pneumonia for 3 weeks, so um, like 2.5 weeks. So yeah, things like that could cause delays if you don't have backups. And right now, we're so small, we don't have too many. So does the customer always know about those type of things? No. Should they care? Not really. I mean, it's not that's not their responsibility. Um, you know, I totally feel for them. Um, but in the end, I hope that if they do, or if better way to maybe phrase it is, if they are that passionate about a title, whether it's Kaiji or Emiya or Heavenly Delusion, that they're patient enough to wait for the physical release. And yeah, it might not be ideal to have to wait, but um, you know, for the most part, I think what they'll end up getting will be worth their time.
Yeah, and you must be feeling similar pain because you're sitting there wanting, I want to publish it, but it's just not there yet. And
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, and that's the other thing too, is that whether it's myself or whether it's my production manager, or even the freelance translators that we work with, we want to put out the best product that we can. So we have to be comfortable to let it go, and that generally isn't always like a problem, but you know we'll we'll see typos right until you know we send things out to the printer, and um, we'll see little things that just like, oh yeah, that little spot right there that was on the Japanese files that we could maybe clear up, but is it worth it? And, um, we'll most likely clear it up anyway. But yeah, it's more than, well, I won't say more than the fans, but we definitely do want to put out those books, and because we want to hear people's response, and um, uh, you know we also want to enjoy that excitement.
Yeah. We're all consumers of manga. You just happen to be a little bit more involved in the process.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of involvement, I can't remember if you've mentioned this before, but I know some other publishers have done community surveys. I know Vertical has done them, Kodansha, Seven Seas, Viz Media. Um, are there plans
Yeah.
to be doing that, or has that already happened and I'm just blind?
No, I mean we're going to be doing that once we have the capacity to do so. It the main reason that we haven't so far is more, yeah, uh, we're not doing a lot of acquisitions right now. So we kind of have a list of titles that we want to get through if they're still available. Um, and once we're at the point where we're doing more than a book every 6 weeks, um, and once we're at the point where we can do like 3 or 4 books a month or so, that's when we're going to start asking people for suggestions, because right now it's we still have a, a good chunk of Kaiji to still do. We got another 5 more volumes of that, and um, we still have 4 more volumes of Mari, and 2 more volumes of Amiya, and Sampaku is going to be at least 3 volumes. So um, pardon me. So yeah, we have a pretty full deck until nearly the end of next year, and even then, um, I'm going to be going to Tokyo in a week, and you know, hopefully come back with a couple other acquisitions by then. So there, there isn't really a real lot of room for outside suggestions right now, but down the line for sure.
And more on sort of community stuff. I know you have some of like the big boy numbers when it comes to like sales data and that kind of thing. Whereas kind of maybe I just don't know where to look, but the resources that I have to kind of see what series are doing are the numbers that the publishers elect to publish. And then I have things like aggregator sites like My Anime List to sort of use. Are those just kind of tossed away, or is it mostly just those sales numbers, or do publishers also take a look at sort of what's happening on My Anime List, Reddit, and sort of other sites like that?
In regards to what exactly?
Sort of what series that people are sort of interested in, sort of at the
Mm,
moment.
um, yeah, I'm not going to speak for other people, but personally speaking, yeah, I never pay Mal any mind. Their aggregate numbers are very. If I were to have followed them more in at former places of employment, I think I would have been out of the business a long time ago, um, because generally speaking, some of those things have not necessarily panned out as well. The few times I've tried, um, So yeah, I don't necessarily look at aggregates like Mal or Baka updates or things like that much. Reddit, yeah, I honestly have rarely used or been on Reddit. Period, in any type of capacity. Definitely not for manga. I can't tell you what that scene is like at all. I've never been on there for that. Uh, so yeah, it's sales data is one thing, and we get to see that through sources like BookScan, and uh, it's useful for authors that pardon me that have been published before. But under any other circumstances, you're kind of just fumbling in the dark. So, you know, as far as acquisitions are concerned, sometimes you have to take recommendations from people that you trust, and or be confident in uh, your own eye for titles, and yeah, you know, make a choice and take your shot and see how it goes. It's not always going to work out, but hopefully, if you're confident enough with the property, whether it works out or not, it hopefully wouldn't be too relevant, as long as the product itself is all right and you haven't committed an insane amount of money into it.
Okay. Moving on. I know you sell certain merchandise at conventions. Are there any plans to bring that merchandise sort of to larger retailers as opposed to just at conventions, or are those mostly just for like special sort of like not really gifts, but offerings to those that come out and see you guys at cons?
Yeah, definitely not likely going to be putting that in stores, just because it's paper and that type of thing. Stores are not too bold on. I mean, maybe posters, but even then, there are only some maybe like specialty shops, like comic shops that might be into that type of thing. We might, once our website and web store are up, uh, whenever that happens, have some of those things available there. But in in all truth, some of those uh, goodies that we've made are actually specifically con exclusives, contractually. So you know what we can do with some of those items can be very limited, and that's another thing I don't necessarily think that the average fan completely understands. Um, uh, and I've had handful of people asking about sticker sheets or posters and book covers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a merchandise is a little more complicated than people may think, even though it can be pretty hype.
Yeah, I know. When we don't get to see the contracts, some people, they don't understand that those things actually exist, and they can kind of limit the kind of things that you can do. So, it's always nice to be reminded that, hey, the publishers aren't at complete liberty to do whatever the heck they want. There are
Yeah,
some contractual obligations that they have to sort of abide by.
yeah.
Um, is there anything else that you would like to add? Promote any of your series that are coming out soon? I know Kaiji, Pleasure and Corruption, Heavenly Delusion are coming out
Yep.
somewhat soon.
Yeah, Kaiji should be in stores hopefully like next middle of next month. And then after that, we should have heavily delusion by Masakazu Ishiguro. That was selected as the top manga of 2018 in Japan, and really great sci-fi post-apocalyptic story with a number of little twists here and there. Um, really, really hype about that. I think it's going to be a sleeper for a lot of people. Pleasure and Corruption, fun, kind of quirky slice of life, coming of age story. And that's going to be in the middle of November. Um, yeah, it's fun to be in a position right now where we've got new series launching basically back to back to back. Particularly after focusing so much time on Emiya and Inside Mare. But once again, both of those titles are doing very well for us, but we're really stoked to see what the future will be, particularly with these books launching in new retail avenues, and you know, just curious to see how putting these books into new places, the new type of readers that we'll be introduced to and how they'll react to the books is something that we're really looking forward to seeing. So, obviously those three books are solid on their own. They're very good. But opening up those doors to new readers, I think is equally as exciting for us. So look forward to some new properties coming up very soon from us, and hopefully we'll continue to follow those for the next following months, and in the case of Kaiji and Heavenly Delusion for the next couple of years or so. So pretty cool.
Well, I'm definitely excited for some of your newer titles as well as some of your continuing titles. Inside Mari has been I've liked that series for quite a long time, and I'm very happy to see it actually finally getting published. But those of you that got it right on Twitter when I asked about this, I am interviewing someone. But I just really want to thank Ed Chavez from Denpa Books for agreeing to do this interview with me. I hope you guys learned a lot sort of about more of the industry side of things, sort of in the manga publishing business here in North America. It was a great time talking with him, and I learned a lot, things that I never really thought of before. It was just a really great experience. Do you have any sort of closing remarks?
Oh no, just thanks for reaching out. We particularly in regards to podcasts or the audio format, we're more than willing to reach out and communicate with people. Same thing in regards to print. I know a lot of people don't type things out anymore, but that really helps us quite a bit, and it gives us a different type of outreach, whether it's to obviously to other readers, but also to retailers as well. So we hope your listeners end up giving our books a chance if they haven't in the past. I hope they found some of this information somewhat useful, if not interesting. Because I'll be frank, as someone who was a fan a long time ago, or just like regular, just a casual fan a long time ago, it was always a mystery to understand what the insides and of what it was like to be a publisher were like, and people don't necessarily get those opportunities all that often. So I'm more than willing to pull back the curtain a little bit on that, because I think it's beneficial to give people a little bit of education. It gives fans in many circumstances an opportunity to feel a little more invested in what they're consuming and who to trust in regards to release what they're consuming. So yes, so it was a pleasure.
All right. Well, again, big thanks to Ed Chavez of Denpa Books. If you would like to see more of these types of sort of projects, I guess, in the future, of course, let me know down in the comments down below. Of course, follow Denpa Books on Twitter. They're releasing excellent manga. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you all learned something new. But anyway, I am Laethas, joined by Ed Chavez of Denpa Books. Goodbye.
Yeah. Goodbye. Thanks.